What's happening, everybody? Little impromptu Monday stream for your viewing pleasure, hopefully. And there's a big reason why that you're probably already aware of. The trade of the 2023 offseason that we've all been waiting for, that we've all expected would happen. It's just a matter of when, not if, is officially official. Let me drop this link in for our friends in Discord. As the most anticipated trade of this offseason gets handled, gets put together, and now it's official. Um, the Jets receive Aaron Rodgers and the number 15 pick in this year's draft. The Packers get the 13th pick in the draft, so they swap first rounders this year. They also get a second rounder and a sixth rounder this year. And then on top of that, they get a 2024 second. The Packers do. It's a conditional 2024 second round pick that can become a first round pick if Rodgers plays 65% of the team's snaps this year. Obviously, both the Jets and the Packers hope that is, or I'm sorry, I think it's 2024 snaps that he would have to accumulate, not 2023 for that to vest. Or no, I have it correct. Sorry. Yeah, 2023, 65% of the snaps. If that happens, the 2024 second from the Jets to the Packers becomes a first round pick. So the trade is done. Assets have been finalized and agreed upon. And so now we have, just the fallout of this ahead of the draft. Both teams can move forward with their plans for the future. The Jets are obviously a little bit more of a short-term focus, whereas the Packers are going to be taking a longer view now that their star quarterback and future Hall of Famer is moving on. Lots to unpack from a fantasy perspective. Happy to take any and all questions uh, as it pertains to fantasy. This move, of course, um, it's there's plenty of ramifications now that it is official. Um, some people might, if you're doing best ball drafts, it's like, well, do I take a chance on a guy who maybe is coming into the season injured, like a Brees Hall, any more than I would have if he's not, if this trade for whatever reason didn't go down, and it doesn't seem like it was likely, but there was a little bit of a possibility that this ultimately didn't happen, just because of the randomness of Aaron Rodgers himself and what decision he might ultimately come to. Like, would it have surprised anybody if he just decided that he was, maybe he doesn't retire, but it's just like, I'm going to take the 2023 season off and maybe I'll come back in 2024. Or maybe I do want to play for the Packers after all. Or maybe the Jets decide, oh, we're going to go in a different direction and maybe we're going to try to get Lamar Jackson instead. Like, there were a couple of like, will that happen? Won't it happen? Type of potential scenarios still to play out. That being said, everybody did expect this to happen. Everybody expected this to go down eventually. But now that it is official, you can uh, kind of take that approach of what to do with skill position players on both teams. And we could talk about that today. I'll start with the Jets. The obvious. I'll start with the obvious, right? The Jets, of course. And what's going on, everybody? Good to see you guys coming in. Thanks for coming in and hanging out. Again, any questions as it pertains to the trade, happy to take it. Otherwise, I can just ramble on about what I think about the fantasy fallout, the fantasy ramifications here. As it pertains to the Jets, Aaron Rodgers had a QB2 ish season for the Packers last year. It wasn't one of his more spectacular seasons. Supporting cast could have something to do with that. The team was not playing very well to start the season. Christian Watson took a little bit of time to kind of get his get his sea legs under him. Um, and overall, the Packers wide receiver core was leaving something to be desired last year from a top to bottom overall depth perspective. Ultimately, it led to the Packers needed to rely heavily on their running backs, and that worked out okay, but not great for them. All this to say, Rodgers didn't have a spectacular season. And Rodgers himself had spurts last year where he just didn't play well. Um, you have to imagine that whether you regardless of how you feel about how Rodgers played last year, this is a shot in the arm for him. It's not just the Jets. It's a shot in the arm for Rodgers himself. He gets a little bit of like a career renaissance, right? He gets to join he gets to join a team that's ready to compete, that has a roster that is ready to compete now, not just in the division, but in the AFC in general. The defense is playoff ready. The talent on offense is obvious. They were just missing a quarterback. So now that that's official, I mean, it's fair to rank Rodgers again as a top 12 quarterback for fantasy purposes. And I was pretty adamant on this channel last year going into the season that because of all of the uncertainty around the Packers offense, you know, Devontae Adams traded. Um, Marquez Valdez Scantling moves on. Um, you're down to Alan Lazard going into the draft. They were down to Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb. Um, it wasn't much else after that. They had a couple of tight ends. They had Robert Tunyon coming back from an injury. It was pretty bare bones, other than Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon in the backfield. Now they draft Christian Watson. They draft Romeo Dubs to try to bolster the depth a little bit. And they contributed. They helped, especially Watson in the second half of the season. Um, but ultimately, that Packers offense wasn't uh, super threatening, wasn't exactly high octane. Didn't I can't imagine, even with Aaron Rodgers being who he is, I don't think the 2022 Packers offense was keeping up too many defensive coordinators at night. Sorry, but that's just that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Not everybody's going to be excellent every single year. This is different now. He has Garrett Wilson. He reconnects with Alan Lazard, who has been a touchdown scorer in his career with the Packers. So that relationship gets rekindled. Um, you sign Mecole Hardman in free agency, who's a burner and started to turn things on a little bit last year and start to put together a little bit of consistency before an injury ultimately stopped that. Um, he contributes. Obviously, he wasn't exactly blowing up catching passes from Patrick Mahomes, so gets yet another excellent quarterback to work with in Aaron Rodgers, but he'll be the wide receiver 3-ish any given week. Decent depth, though, for Rodgers to work with. And then, of course, in the backfield, we'll see what happens with Breece Hall, who's coming back from a torn ACL. People have their thoughts about that, right? How do I attack? How do I address a player coming off a significant injury for fantasy purposes going into the following season, going into the next season? I have been all in on taking your chances with Breece. And I know that there are concerns with the injury, right? It was a clean ACL tear that happened week 7 or 8, right? So that's right in that range of will he be ready for week 1? Personally, I don't care. I'll draft Breece Hall. That's not a problem. His ADP on Underdog right now, well, right now Underdog's got all their Superflex contests ongoing, not their 1 QB traditional redraft. But Breece was going in the 3rd round, like middle of the 3rd round, at least on Underdog Fantasy in their 1 QB contests at the very start of the offseason for all you people like me who play best ball in March. It was about a 3rd round ADP. In the Superflex contests, his ADP right now, Brees Hall's, is 38, 38.4. So that, yeah, it rounds down to 38. So that's like the 3-4 turn. Now that's in super flex. So in one quarterback, you're talking about the top of the third round, even with the uncertainty around the clean ACL tear. I'm fine with taking that chance because Brees is young, right? It's not like he's an older veteran running back with lots of wear and tear, with lots of tread on the tires, suffer who has come back. It's another injury. I'm just painting a blanket scenario here. It's not a situation where he's coming back from multiple injuries and it's just like, oh my God, can he do this? Can he overcome this? Is he going to be able to get back to any type of form that we're used to? That's not the case. That's not the talking points, the scenarios with Brees Hall. Is he going to be Brees for the first 4 weeks of the season? Maybe not. But is he going to be Brees? I can be an RB1 to carry your team through chunks of the season in the second half and ideally the fantasy playoffs. I don't see why that's not possible for Brees Hall. It wasn't this extensive, like he's got the ACL and it's also an MCL and it's also an LCL and it's going to be this long road back. That wasn't the case with Brees's injury. Now it was with a guy like say Javonte Williams, but that's a whole different story. I am totally fine, and we've seen what Aaron Rodgers led offenses, what those running backs have produced. It's mostly been Aaron Jones recently, but the upside of any healthy running back in an Aaron Rodgers led offense is a top 5 season for fantasy purposes. So, yes, buy Brees Hall in the third round. I'm all in on that. As for the pass catchers, when this news started to actually get some legs, right? When we really started to, when it turned to, will this trade happen in March to, okay, now we expect it to happen. It's just a matter of when. Garrett Wilson's ADP was around the 2-3 turn. It was late second. That's not the case anymore. Garrett Wilson's one quarterback ADP I've seen go as high as, again, March best ball leagues. I've seen him taken at the 1-2 turn. Within the top 12 to 14 picks. That's not going to go anywhere in any one quarterback leagues. And there's going to be a lot of people who balk at that price, right? Oh, well, Garrett Wilson's really good, but am I really going to take him over Amon-Ra St. Brown, who will, the Lions will be without Jameson Williams for the first 6 games of the season? Will I really take Garrett Wilson over Jalen Waddle, who was a wide receiver 1 last year? Will I take him over Chris Olave, over T. Higgins, over DK Metcalf? Because that's what the speculation of this trade was doing to Garrett Wilson's ADP. It was inflating it, which you can, obviously understand. He already had an excellent season last year, catching passes from Zach Wilson and Mike White and Joe Flacco. Who else did the Jets start at quarterback last year? I feel like there was a 4th guy. Regardless, he gets 147 targets. He catches 83 of them. So that ratio will even itself out. Even if he only ends up with 130 targets, which that's just a random number, you would think he can catch 95 of those, right? So 1,100 yards, 4 touchdowns. You can expect the touchdown numbers to go up a little bit more just because the quarterback play is now officially elevated. So, yeah, I mean, if you can get Garrett Wilson at 15, do that. If you have to take him over CeeDee Lamb or Devontae Adams or A.J. Brown, I love Garrett Wilson. I'm not ready to go there. Because now you're talking about the wide receiver 6, 7, and 8, and those expectations are just incredibly lofty. Now, we expect Garrett Wilson at this point, now that it's official, to be able to build on at least 2 of the 3 stats the big 3, right? Catches, yards, touchdowns. I think it's fair to say, kind of blanket statement, you can expect Garrett Wilson to improve in at least 2 of those areas, and the number 1 would be touchdowns, right? You just expect the Jets offense to have more scoring opportunities now, right? That's just the direct correlation that we make from the move like this. So touchdowns you can expect to go up from 4 And then 1,100 yards can be built upon, and so can 83 catches. Will all three of them be improvements? They could be, but I'll say conservatively, you can definitely expect two of those three numbers to rise. Touchdowns being the obvious one. I don't know, though, that you expect to take Wilson with confidence over guys like A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb. Who was the other guy I mentioned? Devontae Adams, right? Who, even though he's getting a quarterback downgrade, I'm still taking Devontae Adams. Who it's just that's just a track record type of thing for me. If you want to project and figure, well, Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers is better than Devontae Adams with Jimmy Garoppolo. That's your prerogative. I personally wouldn't go that far. If the Raiders draft a quarterback and you start to get the vibes that Garoppolo is a stopgap for the first, third of the season, and then they turn to the rookie, like, all right, fine. You can make that argument, but I'm not going to go there. I would still take Adams based on the pedigree, and while it's a downgrade from Carr to Garoppolo, it's not enough of one where it's like, you know, no disrespect to Jarrett Stidham, but it's not like the Raiders are expecting to go into the season with Stidham as the starter. Then it's like, yeah, all right, pull Devontae Adams down a notch as far as where you're going to draft him. I would, and I would even say I would throw Amon-Ra in there as well. Now that Jameson Williams is going to miss the first 6 games of the season for the Lions, I would put Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of Garrett Wilson as well. So to me, if anybody's taking Garrett Wilson ahead of Amon-Ra, now that this news is official, to that's like, all right, Amon-Ra's a value in my redraft league now. So I'm very excited for Garrett Wilson. I think he's about to have an excellent season. I certainly think he can finish end the season as a wide receiver 1. Top 12, yes. Top 10, it's in the range of outcomes. Top 6, 7, or 8, I think I got to take the other guys. I think I got to take A.J. Brown. I got to take CeeDee Lamb. I got to take Devontae Adams. And yeah, I got to take Amon-Ra St. Brown. So if you want to say top 10, sure. If you want to say top 12 slam dunk, sure. I'm not ready to take him as my wide receiver 6 or 7, which is probably, if you take him in the first round, in the back half of the first round, which again, I saw in a couple of 1 QB best ball March drafts, I don't know that I'm ready to go there. I think that's a little rich, even with this trade being official. Going to have an excellent season. Could have a top 10 season. Probably should have a top 12 season. Top 6 or 7 would be a little rich. CXK, Alex, Daniel, Use a Nerd, Senor Rojo, Mike, good to see all you guys. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for coming and hanging out. Everybody else who's coming in, spending the afternoon here. Let me plug my laptop in, actually, so that I don't randomly lose you guys. That would be a little silly of me. Obviously, you kind of probably already figured it out by now if you haven't already, but just to rehash for anybody who's just jumping in, obviously reacting from a fantasy football perspective, and this can be dynasty, redraft, whatever format you prefer, reacting to the Aaron Rodgers trade becoming official, being sent to the New York Jets, draft compensation also being included on both sides. And then, of course, live AMA. You guys can ask whatever questions you may have, whether it's about this, fantasy in general, what the fantasy fallout is from the Aaron Rodgers trade. All of that is, of course, on the table. And then just a quick plug. The intent will be Facemask Fantasy. We will be live for the draft. We will be live for the NFL draft this Thursday. Just want to plug that. If you guys are around and want to spend it with us, we'll be here. We will be live for the draft. All reactions, all fantasy reactions as the night unfolds, the first round, and ideally the second round as well. As everything unfolds, we'll be sure to talk shop here and give our reactions and thoughts as it pertains to fantasy as the draft unfolds. But for now, the focus today is the Aaron Rodgers trade and the fantasy fallout there. So we'll continue on with that. I've talked a little bit about Breece Hall, talked a little bit about Garrett Wilson. I'll keep it moving with the ancillary pieces. Allen Lazard, his ADP is it's affordable. Let's put it that way. as of right now, now this is super flex. This will change a little bit. In super flex, again, super flex underdogs best ball drafts that are available now until the NFL draft. Alan Lazard's ADP is 152 and a half. So let's say it's maybe around the 130s in one quarterback. You're talking about the 11th round for a guy who caught like 8 touchdowns last year. 6. It was 8 in 2021, excuse me. So he didn't crack 800 yards at receiving any of those 2 years, but he's got 14 touchdowns over the past 2 seasons. If I can get a wide receiver 130 picks into the draft who has a rapport with the quarterback and averages 7 touchdowns the past 2 seasons, I'm all about that. So right, Elijah Moore is out of the picture, right? Mecole Hardman is in the mix, but he's been sporadic, right, with his on-field consistency. We've seen the flashes, but not the consistency. And it wasn't like he was catching passes from, Joe Schlub in Kansas City. So, Lazard, consider the contract and the pedigree, is way ahead of Mecole Hardman in the pecking order. Getting him 130 picks into a draft, it might be 120 or so more now, or maybe even a little bit. He might go a little higher again now that the trade is official. You're always going to have drafters who they guard against in the event that this doesn't happen, right? They'll be like, well, we don't know for sure. It's like you're talking out of your, you're not talking out of your butt, but it's just like there's been every indication that this is going to eventually happen. So you have people who are going to they drive that price down on purpose because they're just like, I need to see it to believe it. And that's just some people's mindsets. So to have Lazard's ADP pushed down that low, smash that while you can. Join some underdog best balls now while you can and hammer that value. Hammer that value. I like Ty Conklin a lot as a cheap, not even cheap, he's just free. What's Ty Conklin's ADP right now? Because I got to tell you, it's not high enough. 216. Ty Conklin is free, guys. While everybody focuses on Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard and Breece Hall, and rightfully so, Ty Conklin is free. I'll take that. If you don't get Travis Kelce and you don't want to take the middle lane options, your David Njoku's, your Dawson Knox, your Pat Freiermuth, although I'm personally fine. I'm very privy to taking those guys 100 picks into a draft. But if you miss on that, if you miss on Kelce and you miss on the middle lane options where it's I feel like I'm still getting a tight end one, at least as far as rankings go, just punt the hell out of it and take Ty Conklin at the end of your draft. That's a great value. Oh, and the team still has Corey Davis. Davis comes back to life a little bit with this move as well. Probably more so than Mecole Hardman. I would think Corey Davis, who didn't have a spectacular season last year, but I got to think Corey Davis, if he doesn't get cut, Corey Davis, what's his spot rack situation? Spotrac. I'm never sure how to pronounce that. The database where all the contract information is. 3 years. He originally signed 3 years for $37.5 million. This was a couple of years ago at this point. I'm just double checking on Corey Davis's potential cap hit this year. I'm not sure if he's a cap casualty. Let's find this out. This is moving very slowly right now. So they had a potential out this year where the cap hit does go down to about $666,000. So that's nothing. So it is possible that he is cut. It is possible that Corey Davis does get released. So tentatively, I would say maybe don't jump at the fact that he's free just because Aaron Rodgers is his quarterback for now. It's not a complete guarantee that Corey Davis is on the roster. So the last guy, that would leave Michael Carter as the last guy to go over for the Jets offense. And I'll get to some of these questions. I see you guys in here. Greg, good to see you, man. Thanks for dropping in. I'll get to some of these questions here shortly. But my last thought here is the other dude, as far as a huge value right now that people are probably kind of ignoring and overlooking is Michael Carter. Um, I can't imagine the Jets spend significant resources at running back. The only way the Jets spend anything more than a day two pick at running back is if there's something going on with Brees Hall's recovery in a negative way that we're not that is not publicly known or something that the masses don't quite know about yet. I can't imagine that happens. So that means Michael Carter with his like 197 ADP, again, dirt cheap, super free, is really enticing because we've seen now AJ Dillon was severely overdrafted this past year. But we've seen even the backup running back in an Aaron Rodgers led offense be effective, be efficient, get decent fantasy outputs in plus matchups where it would make sense to fire up a 1B of a committee. Michael Carter, I mean, AJ Dillon was being drafted in the 5th or 6th round of some one quarterback leagues last year. Michael Carter is being taken in like the 17th round. And if you're one of those people who is like, well, I don't really want to draft Brees Hall because I'm just worried about the ACL. I don't know if he's going to be himself this year. Then you should be all the way in on Michael Carter. And at his ADP, at his cost, we all should be in on him. We should all be in on Michael Carter. And he wasn't spectacular last year, especially when Brees went down, and you kind of thought to yourself, well, maybe he's the guy. Maybe he's the guy who steps up. Like there were some games where Zonovan Knight kind of took that opportunity, kind of took the limelight away from Michael Carter. He picked up a couple injuries here and there as well, where I think he exited some games and didn't finish them, and so Zonovan Knight got a spurt of games there where he was pitching in and contributing. But I mean, Carter caught 41 balls last year. He's absolutely got plenty of viability as a committee back. And that reminds me, as it pertains to Zonovan Knight, that even further makes me feel like the Jets are not going to spend any capital on a running back. So Michael Carter in the dregs of the draft, like 190 picks into a draft, it might be more like 175 picks into a draft in one QB leagues. And his stock will, of course, go on the rise now that the trade is official. But you want to talk about a bargain running back where it's just worth it to take a roll of the dice on, to just gamble on, especially if you're one of those people that's concerned about Brees Hall, at least to start the 2023 season. You should be all over that. You should be all over Michael Carter. So, in summary, I would put Rodgers as I would probably put him as around the QB 11 or 12. Right? Like, it's Jalen Hurts, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Justin Fields. This is for fantasy, right? We're not doing NFL rankings here. We're doing fantasy rankings. Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, Burrow, Herbert, Fields, Lamar Jackson, assuming that situation gets sorted out. I would take Trevor Lawrence. And then it's kind of like Rodgers slips into that territory of like the conversation with Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, and if he's healthy, Tua. So he's in that low-end QB1 tier for me. So if you were drafting early, I mean, Rodgers was going off the board as the QB14. He's gonna end up going higher than that. He's gonna get drafted over Kirk Cousins. He's gonna get drafted over Daniel Jones. And there's going to be plenty of people who prefer him to the likes of Dak Prescott, Tua Tagovailoa, and Deshaun Watson. I think I would actually personally lean Dak because he's got CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and Michael Gallup. And I just like that wide receiver core better, plus Tony Pollard. Well, assuming he's able to come back healthy from the broken foot. But like Aaron Rodgers over Deshaun Watson, you can argue that. Over Kirk Cousins, you can absolutely argue that. Over Daniel Jones, I don't even think that's a question anymore, or it never was. But But Daniel Jones's ADP is ahead of Aaron Rodgers right now. That's to me like that's outrageous. Um, and then Tua is in that conversation as well. So Rodgers is in the QB 10 to 12 range. I like Brees Hall in the third round. I like Garrett Wilson if I can get him in the second round, but not the late first. It's just a little too rich for my blood. And then Alan Lazard and Michael Carter are spectacular values. Ty Conklin is a bargain basement free roll of the dice at tight end. That's the Jets. That's the Jets. So Senor Rojo, just to just wrap up the thoughts on Brees Hall. In one quarterback, he's a third round pick because of the current today, right now. If you're doing underdog best balls, he's a third round pick. We'll obviously get more information about his progress as far as his recovery from the injury as we get closer to the season. If it sounds like he's going to have few or no limitations, yeah, he's going to be a second round pick. He's going to be a second round pick. And if he's proving that he's good, he's healthy, he's fine, he's fully recovered from the torn ACL, not totally out of the realm of possibility, but maybe a little far fetched at least as far as when as we sit here today at the end of April. TBD there, but I'm taking him in the third round in one QB leagues, and I'm taking him at the 3-4 turn in Superflex leagues. And then as far as CXK, as far as Jordan Love and Superflex, yeah, I mean he's worth his value has skyrocketed. If you weathered the storm, if you drafted Jordan Love early, hopefully you weren't needing to rely on him. If you were, that was bad because he hasn't played. But if you weathered the storm as far as like, well, he's QB depth, and I want to see how things play out, and the Packers made him a first round pick, and they did the same thing with Aaron Rodgers all those years ago, where they waited to play him for 3 years, and I'll just like see how this plays out while he develops on the bench. Yeah, pat yourself on the back. Your patience was rewarded. Will he be a low end QB1 for fantasy or a high end QB2 for fantasy? Remains to be seen. We don't really have anything to go off of. Love looked, I'll say he looked competent. He looked viable when he came in for relief on Monday Night Football this past year when Rodgers exited due to injury. That was against the Eagles. Love looked competent, right? And some of the output, some of the production came on a couple of big plays, right? That Christian Watson crossing route where Watson kind of just did that. He did the rest. He caught the ball and then just was like, I'm faster than you. So remains to be seen if Jordan Love will be a high-end QB2 who's viable in Superflex leagues, if not better. That remains to be seen. But his value now has officially never been higher. I would say it's higher now than it was when he got drafted. Because now he's the starter. We'll see what he can do. He's got Aaron Jones. He's got A.J. Dillon. He's got Christian Watson. He's got Romeo Doubs. You figure the Packers are going to go back to the well in the draft and get more and get another wide receiver. I mean, hell, the Packers are in play for Jackson Smith and Jigba, which would be a little ironic that they finally draft the top receiver prospect in the draft immediately after Aaron Rodgers leaves. I don't know if you can call that poetic justice or not, but feels along those lines. So they'll add to their room if they do bring in Smith and Jigba or Quentin Johnston or Jordan Addison. Obviously, Love's stock goes up even a little bit more. It's just another weapon to work with, another young player to develop and grow with, which has been the Packers' MO for their entire existence. They always feel like they're the team that they're the most resistant to free agency, right? Is there another team that's more resistant to free agency year in, year out than the Packers? I know they've dipped sometimes, right? They've been times where they've dipped before. But they've generally looked to build with their homegrown talent. So pairing a wide receiver with their young quarterback, on paper makes sense. We'll see if that pans out. We'll see if that pans out. So Love's ADP is also, is probably on the rise. His ADP in Superflex leagues right now was about 51 on Underdog Fantasy. So you got to spend a fourth or fifth round pick to get him. High fifth, late fourth to acquire him in Superflex leagues. In one quarterback, his ADP is probably going to settle in within the top 100. Somewhere like 85, 90 picks into the draft, maybe a little later than that. Could be decent value in one quarterback, but I just because he's now the starter doesn't make me. I'm not like, at least in one quarterback leagues, I'm not running to hand in like a draft pick where I draft Jordan Love. I'm not like rushing to the table to make that happen. If he falls a little bit, then sure, could be interesting QB2 depth, especially in best ball. Because he's going to get every opportunity. Like, he's going to be the guy. The Packers are, at least for this season, are going to sink or swim with Jordan Love. So, let's see. What else do we have here? But yeah, if you held on to Jordan Love and Superflex, at the very least, you got some really nice quarterback depth now. Your quarterback room is probably looking pretty deep at the very least. So nicely done. Your patience was rewarded. Greg, as far as do I think Green Bay got robbed? No, I don't think Green Bay got robbed. And what's going on, Chevy? I mean, I guess I'm more kind of in the same time the thought process there. I mean, Green Bay got rid of a quarterback who was done playing with them, right? Rodgers. I think it's fair to say no matter what would have happened, while we obviously all expected this trade to go down, I think the one thing we didn't expect to happen, the last possible scenario to play out here, was Rodgers playing for Green Bay again. So they get rid of a guy who was not going to play for the franchise anymore. How old is he at this point? He's 38, 39 years old. I mean, in a perfect world, Aaron Rodgers has what, 4 or 5 more years left, and I don't know that all of that is MVP level play. He's 39. He's going to be 40 in December. And when I say 4 or 5, that's generous. That's perfect. Again, perfect world scenario. 2 or 3 might be a little bit more realistic. So the Packers give that up. They get rid of Rodgers. They get a chance to move forward. They swap first round picks, right? So they move from 15 to 13. That's not nothing. They get a second rounder this year, and they get a second rounder next year that can still turn into another first round pick. It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense from Green Bay's perspective because they weren't competing. It makes sense because they weren't competing. Now, as far as the Jets go, as I said earlier, they have a team that's ready to compete, right? That defense proved last year that it's playoff caliber. It's playoff ready. And the skill guys all up and down the offense are much deeper than what Green Bay currently has. Much deeper. So the Jets are going for it in it's a really short window that they have, and in a crowded AFC, by the way. Like, the Jets look like contenders, but remember, they're contenders along with the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Bills. You could probably they're a tier below, but you could start to throw Jacksonville in there. They look like they've turned a corner, and Trevor Lawrence looks like it's He was absolutely worth the investment, that Jacksonville made in him a couple years ago. Um, and at least for now, assuming Tua is healthy, you got to throw the Dolphins in there as well. So it's a loaded division. I mean, much less the conference. But the Jets have a roster that's ready to compete now. And so they feel like it was worth the cost to go up and get him, even though he's 39 going on 40 years old. So it's a really tight window, but I guess to the Jets' credit, other than quarterback, they've built up everything else. Everything else is ready to go. The defense is ready to go. The supporting cast on offense is ready to go. They just needed a quarterback. They get it. Um, and so now they have a window of contention, but it is a tough road that they are facing. I mean, so I would say, I guess, in that regard, obviously, from a fan's perspective, we all want our favorite team to be competitive, right? Every year in a perfect world, our favorite team is competitive. So right now, yeah, the Jets are winners. The Jets are expected to compete this year now. So they're short-term winners. But from Green Bay's perspective, they weren't competing even if Aaron Rodgers came back, not with the roster they currently have. Now they have an opportunity to kind of reconstruct that, right? Around a quarterback who's still on it's only a couple of years at this point, but it's on a cheap contract. It's the rookie contract for Jordan Love. It's only going to be for 2 more years, and that's including if the Packers pick up the option. But they have the flexibility there to either do that or revisit quarterback in the 2024 draft, if not this year. That's the other thing. The Packers are in play if they want. We don't know if they want to or not, but if they want, they're in play for one of the top quarterback prospects this year. So, long term, this made sense for the Packers. Short term, even though their odds are long, it makes sense for the Jets. So, with that in mind, yeah, you you prefer the long view. You prefer the long view, especially if your team's not ready to compete like the Packers. But that's what you want. If you're not ready to compete, then stockpile picks. And that's what they did. Unloading a 39-year-old quarterback who didn't want to play for Green Bay anymore. I mean, yeah, I mean, the pressure is on the Jets. The pressure's on because they got to compete with the Bills and the Dolphins just in their division. That's just the AFC East. And the Bills are going to be the favorites going into the season. I don't think the Rodgers trade, it obviously levels it. It levels the odds a little bit, but the Bills are going to be favored to win the division. And then the Chiefs and the Bengals, with the Bills probably somewhere in there, not too far behind, are going to be favored to win the conference. So the Jets have an uphill battle on their hands. It made sense that they made this move because they have the roster that's ready to compete now, but they better deliver. They better deliver. So, you know, as a Jets fan, if I was a Jets fan, I'm not a Jets fan, but if I was a Jets fan, I'm cautiously excited. And if I'm a Packers fan, yeah, there might be some nostalgia or whatever, but you're not competing this year. Not with the roster you have. So this move makes sense. I would say it made sense more for the Packers than it did for the Jets. Ultimately. Ultimately. Because and then, the Packers can go one of two ways. They can shock the world and move up to get one of the quarterbacks this year if there's a guy that they love other than Jordan. pun intended. If not, they ride with Jordan Love, and if he's solid, okay, the Packers have something to work with for at least a couple of years. If he stinks, they're in contention for the 2024 top options for Caleb Williams and Drake May. And that's a position where a rebuilding team also wants to be in. Not to mention, especially in a conference in an NFC where the top quarterbacks, as far as that conversation, who are the top quarterbacks in the NFC? It is a wide freaking open crapshoot of a conversation. So the Packers have lots of flexibility. Are they not going to be good this year? That's I don't know if it's yeah, it's probable. It's probable they're not good this year. The Vikings are still better than them. The Lions are probably better than them. Uh, Maybe not the Bears, but the Bears have their quarterback. The Bears are looking to take steps forward. I mean, the Packers, they just don't have the talent right now to compete. So they get to hit the reset button. They're not competing this year, even in a wide open NFC. This move makes sense for them. It makes plenty of sense for them. And while the trade makes sense in theory for the Jets, there's an awfully lot of pressure on the Jets now. And Rodgers himself. I mean, you're going up against Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, and Tua in a stacked race for the AFC crown. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. As far as who got fleeced, I know there's some conversation. I know there's conversation going on right now about who got fleeced or what. I mean, if the Jets flame out in the playoffs, then yeah, they're the team that got fleeced. If the Jets, if they get to the AFC Championship game and they have a couple of years where they're really good and they're a top 3 team in the AFC, I'm not going to sit here and speculate that they can win a Super Bowl when they're in the same conference as Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen. But if they're good, if they're really good for a few seasons, Rodgers rides off into the sunset. Maybe they've got an AFC championship to their name. They compete in the Super Bowl. It's going to be hard to argue that the Jets didn't make the right move to make the trade. But there's way more pressure on them to actually execute for us to be able to say it worked out for the Jets. The trade made sense for the Jets. So today, right now, there's no question you can say the trade makes sense for the Packers. Whether it made sense for the Jets or not, I think we got to let time play itself out. But yeah, I mean, for it to be a success, I mean, you don't have to win the division, although you better be in the conversation. You better be in the hunt for the division. Um, but if they're a wild card team and they win in their first season and Rodgers goes on the road, wins a couple playoff games, today on the surface right now, that sounds like a success. That sounds like, okay, this was a good season. Because there's only one team every year that wins the Super Bowl. Obviously, you guys know that. I mean, to that point, I don't think that means that only one team each year has what would be considered a successful season. It's all relative, right? The Jets haven't had a play. When's the last time the Jets won a playoff game? Like 2006? So I mean, if they can get to the divisional round of the playoffs and it's a competitive game, or if they're able to get to the AFC Championship game, that's a success. If they win the division, that's a really good first step. I would still say the Bills are the favorites, and it's not particularly a conversation that I think that is warranted at this point. The Bills have deserved more benefit of the doubt than the Jets right now as far as division odds. But if the Jets are a wild card team in year 1, they go on the road, they win a playoff game, they go on the road again, maybe they win 2. Yeah, that's a success. That's a good year, especially for a franchise that, again, hasn't had a playoff win in almost 20 years. I mean, obviously, ultimately, the Super Bowl would be the tell all here. If Rodgers can deliver one, get another one for himself, get another one for the Jets, then yeah, that probably makes everything moot. At that point, it's likely the Packers, you know, maybe they don't lose the trade, but it's just like if we had just built a team ourselves around Aaron Rodgers, maybe we're the ones in the in the Super Bowl instead of the Jets. That's another conversation for entirely different circumstances, though. But that's what it would require for it to be a success. All the pressure is off the Packers. The Packers are now officially not expected to do anything this year. So whatever amount of success they have or don't have kind of doesn't matter because they're looking to the future. But as for the Jets, I mean, as far you got to win at least one playoff game this year, and you're going to have to make it to an AFC Championship game at some point. Let's put the benchmark there. Let's put the bar there and go from there. So, um, and then as far as the Packers as it pertains to fantasy, again, I talked about how the Jets and how this pertains to fantasy. I can timestamp this for anybody who wants to come back to go back and take a look and check it out. But as far as the Packers, from a fantasy perspective, I can tell you right now, Aaron Jones's value is about to go down. Like in ADP, uh, in expectation as far as the season he's going to have, Aaron Rodgers' value is probably about to go down. It was already kind of low because everybody was expecting this trade to go down. In Superflex right now, Aaron Jones's ADP is 66. In one quarterback, let's say it's like, you know, 7, 8 spots higher. Let's say you can get Aaron Jones in the 5th round of one quarterback in one quarterback redraft leagues. I would probably do that. You're not going to get the efficiency, most likely, that Jones enjoyed while playing with Aaron Rodgers, but you're going to get some volume. I would think you get a volume increase. Packers could lean on the run a little bit more, protect Jordan Love, in theory. Aaron Jones is still, was he 28? I was going to say, he's still only like 28 years old. He's 28. I think he'll be 29 later this year. Yeah. So Aaron Jones is getting older, but remember, Aaron Jones has never, not one season, received like a 300 touch workload. He's never been a guy that gets the level of volume that Ezekiel Elliott was getting when he was with the Cowboys, or what Derrick Henry has enjoyed in his career with the Titans, or even what like Dalvin Cook has gotten with the Vikings, like or a Christian McCaffrey workload, Jonathan Taylor a couple of years ago. Aaron Jones has never received that. So there's wear and tear, there's tread on the tires for sure. But I mean, you're not talking about like the significant wear and tear that a 28-year-old starting running back typically has uh, that they're carrying. So I'm not scared of Aaron Jones. Like the concern of the decrease in production is like severely already baked into his ADP. You should be drafting Aaron Jones. You should 100% be drafting Aaron Jones. If anybody is like, well, I'm not drafting him because Rodgers is gone. He's still their starting running back, and he's been an RB1, I think, like 3 of the past 4 seasons, or maybe all 4 seasons, and then the other one. No, that's what it was. Aaron Jones has been an RB1 3 of the past 4 years. He's finished as an RB1 3 of the past 4 years. And that 4th year, he was an RB1 in points per game. He missed a few games. And so as far as overall finish, he did not finish as an RB1. But in points per game, he was an RB1. Aaron Jones is just a goddamn good football player. And you should be drafting him in the 5th round. I would be all over that, and I am all over that. I am absolutely drafting Aaron Jones. Let everybody else's concern about that be your reward. As far as his backfield, as far as his running mate, AJ Dillon. Again, I touched on him a little bit earlier in the stream. Dillon was a way too high of a pick last year for a guy who was part of a committee, the 1B in a committee, no less, but he was still being drafted in the fifth or sixth round of redraft leagues because of everybody had high expectations for the Packers backfield because Dillon performed well in 2021. And also, we were all looking at the Packers receiving core last year, going into last year, and be like, there's not too much impressive about that. They're going to need to funnel production to their running backs as much as they possibly can. Dillon got overdrafted. He didn't have a good year. He came on strong toward the end of the season, but by and large, for the first like 11, 12 weeks of the season, it was bad. It wasn't good. He wasn't getting enough opportunities, and he wasn't translating the opportunities he was getting into anything as far as viable fantasy production. As a result, his ADP is now down to the 120s. Maybe it's more like 110 in one quarterback redraft leagues. At that cost, I'm back in. At that cost, I'm back in on AJ Dillon. He's no longer a fifth round pick. He's now like an 11th or 11th round pick, 10th or 11th round pick. And again, I understand that the Packers are probably about to take a tumble from an efficiency perspective on offense. But they're probably going to, once again, lean on those running backs while they have a young quarterback that they're breaking in. Whether it's Jordan Love or again, or if they shock the world and move up to get one of the top prospects in this year's class. I got to imagine while they have Jordan Love still on a rookie contract, they're going to ride that wave and see what they have in Love because they've invested this much time in him already. Let's see what we have and go from there. And if it's not good, then we can just dive back in 2024 when it's possible that Green Bay has 2 first-round picks. To me, that means they're going to lean on the running game. So AJ Dillon probably feels like a gross pick after what happened last year, but you're getting him 60 picks cheaper this year than he was as opposed to last year. Buy the dip on the Packers running backs. Without question, buy the dip on the Packers running backs. The last guy that we need to touch on in the Packers offense, of course, is Christian Watson. In Superflex leagues, he's got an ADP of around 70. In one quarterback leagues, it's probably in the 10 to 15 spots higher. At least 8 to 10 spots higher in one quarterback leagues. So let's say his ADP is around 60 in one QB and it's like 70-ish in Superflex. That's fine from the perspective of today, again, we got to see what the Packers do with their first round pick. But he's going to be the number one option in the offense, right? The only scenario where Christian Watson is not the Packers wide receiver 1 is if they spend the 13th pick on Jackson Smith-Njigba. That's the only scenario. And that's certainly possible that it plays out that way, right? The Packers could just decide if Smith-Njigba's on the board at 13, well, hey, we could use a wide receiver. He's far and away the best prospect at the position in this year's class. We're not enthralled with any of the other guys here. We'll just take him. Now, they could use some offensive line help as well. If they take Smith-Njigba, then we obviously have to revisit the conversation about how we feel about Christian Watson for fantasy for this season and beyond. But if they don't, if the Packers pass on him, if they opt for a tackle or one of the edge guys or a defensive player or offensive lineman at 13, then Watson is the dude. He is the bona fide Number one option in the passing game who should be force fed targets. He only had 65 of them last year, but he spent a good chunk of the first part of the season. I picked up. He had some injuries, and also I think he was fair to say he was just getting his sea legs under him. Right? That was it. He was just getting his sea legs under him, and then the second half of the season happened, and on limited opportunities, he came through big time. He's going around, the guys that are being drafted around Christian Watson. I'll start with I'll go in a range of like 10 picks before him and 10 picks after him. Mike Williams, I'd rather have Mike Williams. DJ Moore, I'd rather have DJ Moore. Just a more proven player. Aaron Jones, his teammate. Whether I need a running back or not, I'd rather have Aaron Jones because all he's done, again, for the past 4 years is be an RB1. Jerry Jeudy, I'd rather have Jeudy. Miles Sanders is getting drafted in that range. I would rather have Christian Watson than Miles Sanders. Let's see how Miles Sanders does behind not the best offensive line in the NFL in his first year in Carolina. Drake London is getting picked one spot ahead of Christian Watson. I would rather take a chance on London. Without knowing what the Falcons are going to do at quarterback, I think London's a little bit more of an overall talent than Watson. Now, here's where it starts to get interesting as it pertains to Watson. The guy's being drafted immediately after him. The first name, and I'm just looking at running backs and wide receivers. If you want to throw tight ends in there, George Kittle is being drafted just ahead of Christian Watson. I'd rather take a chance on Kittle. The guy's being drafted right after Watson, as far as the backs and the receivers, Dalvin Cook. This one's tough because we don't know what Cook's future holds. So I'll take a chance on Watson. Keenan Allen is going a couple spots after Christian Watson. I'd probably take another. I know he's getting older, but I would probably take one more shot on Keenan Allen. I'll take the pedigree. I'll take the track record. And I'll take his quarterback, too. Jahmyr Gibbs, very interesting, very enticing player. We expect his volume to be safe regardless of his landing spot because of his highly versatile profile as a pass catcher. I do actually think I would take the upside of Jahmyr Gibbs over Christian Watson. Christian Kirk. I would rather take Watson because Calvin Ridley's now in the picture for Jacksonville. So I'll take a shot on Watson over Kirk. Watson's going to be the number one guy, again, assuming the Packers don't take Smith and Jigba with the 13th overall pick. Things get a little muddier in Jacksonville now for Christian Kirk because Calvin Ridley is now in the picture. So I'll take Watson over Kirk. Terry McLaurin. I think I'm taking a chance on Terry. The quarterback situation isn't great, but Terry's in the past 2 seasons, Terry's got 190 and 175 half PPR points. I'll take the track record. I'll take the track record. And then David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins, and now we're getting into the Smith and Jigba, Michael Pittman, Tyler Lockett range. I mean, shoot. Michael Pittman was a third-round pick last year. Tyler Lockett finished as a wide receiver 1 last year. David Montgomery's now on a great offense and got paid by the Lions. J.K. Dobbins, you can make an argument if you want to take a shot on the high upside play of Watson over J.K. Dobbins. Like, okay, fine. And then in that mix, also ADP is around 80 in Superflex leagues is Jackson Smith and Jigba, who obviously we don't know his landing spot yet. All this to say, as exciting and tantalizing as Christian Watson is as a talent, and he's going to be the number one option this year, like Alan Lazard is gone, right? It's just him, Romeo Doubs, and whatever other draft picks they bring in. There's a lot of guys getting drafted in that same range that I think I'd rather take a shot on, whether it's their situations are a little bit more stable or they're just the pedigree of being a proven player for year after year after year is going to be something that I take a long look at compared to Christian Watson. So I'm intrigued by him. I think Watson is an awesome talent. He's going to have week winning weeks for you. And therefore, in best ball, it might make sense to take a, maybe you won't roll the dice on Watson compared to some of those names because of his potential spike weeks. I think in straight redraft, though, I'm probably opting for a lot of other names around Christian Watson's ADP over Watson himself because of the uncertainty at quarterback. And while it was excellent, the sample size is still kind of limited. So I'd pump the brakes on Watson if this results in his ADP dropping, like oh now the Rodgers trade is official, and then maybe the Packers maybe they spend a couple of day two picks on receivers, but there's no obvious guy there that it's like that guy's their new wide receiver one. You know, okay, fine, and maybe Watson's ADP falls a little bit again from the fallout of the trade. Yeah, all right, I could dip in, especially in best ball. I'll take some shares because of his high variance. But in redraft, I feel like that's going to be a tough sell. Romeo Dubs is interesting because he's free. He's much cheaper. His ADP is not going to be very high. But you have to worry about do the Packers bring in a wide receiver from the second round and the third round and create a ton of competition? And at least one of those guys beats Dobbs out as far as opportunities for snaps and touches. I think on the whole, I'm targeting the Packers backfield. And while I'm interested in Christian Watson in best ball, in redraft, I'm kind of fading their pass catchers. And Jordan Love is tentatively an interesting QB2, but I'm not going out of my way to reach for him just because it's now, at least today, the Monday before the draft, just because he's entrenched as the starter. I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to reach on that one. So those are some thoughts on the players that are all impacted from a fantasy football perspective as a result of Aaron Rodgers getting traded to the Jets. So just wanted to come on and talk shop for a little bit with you guys about that. Mike, I'll take this is the last question I'll take. And then, Notorious, good to see you. Greg Stevens, thanks for coming in. Thanks for coming and hanging out, contributing to the dialogue. I know there were some conversations about like who won the trade. I mean, I stated my case there on what my thoughts are. I'll timestamp this for anybody who wants to come back and hear my thoughts. Again, this is steered primarily toward what's the fantasy fallout here, but appreciate the conversation, appreciate the dialogue. Thanks guys for coming in, for stopping by. Mike, as far as Brees's price to sell, if you're looking to sell in Dynasty, I mean, you probably drafted him in Superflex last year. You drafted him first or second overall. Actually, you probably drafted him first overall because there weren't the quarterback. That's right. The quarterback class wasn't exactly stellar last year. Nobody was taking Kenny Pickett and Brees Hall over Brees Hall in Superflex leagues. So Brees Hall was the 101 last year. I mean, he's still super young. I'm not letting the torn ACL affect my asking price for him. Honestly, I don't want to trade Brees Hall. But if you're trying, if you're trying to sell him or if you're trying to acquire him, if you can get him for the 105 this year, yeah, I would probably do that. If I know I'm not getting Smith and Jigba, obviously Bijan. Bijan for Brees straight up. You're going to take Bijan. I'm not. I would still take Brees over Smith and Jigba, although that's close. But I would still take that's close. If you think you can trade, if you think you can acquire Smith and Jigba for Brees Hall, that's fair. Because on the flip side, if it was like I have the draft pick that I know I'm going to use to draft Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I got offered Brees Hall, that would be tough to say no to. But also, I think I would ultimately say no to that. So basically, I need the pick that I know is going to be or can become Jackson Smith and Jigba. If not, if not CJ Stroud in a super flex league. The price needs to be really high. And I would probably ask, at this point, if it's not Smith and Jigba, if it's not Stroud or Bryce Young, I'm not even going to throw Bijan in that conversation because you're not getting this year's 101 for Brees Hall, I don't think. Um, I need the pick that I know can become Smith and Jigba, or I need like a 2024 first and a 2025 second. Like ask for a lot. Ask for a lot. Or if you're the one acquiring him, or if you're trying to buy Brees Hall, I mean, if the guy says I'll give you, you know, I'll give him to you for like the 106, then smash accept. I can't imagine that is the case. But the price needs to be really high in either direction. I'm taking him in the third round of redraft leagues this year. I'm not worried about the ACL tear. If anybody is, go ahead and pounce on that. Take that chance. But as far as selling Brees Hall, yeah, I mean, I need a in one QB, I need the second pick for Brees. I need the second pick because that's Smith and Jigba. In Superflex, I need a top 5 pick. Actually, I need a top 4 pick. And on the flip side, if you're trying to acquire Brees Hall, if the asking price is anything less than that, then pay it. Then pay it. I think it's going to be really good. I think that about covers it. Wanted to hop on and talk shop about the Aaron Rodgers trade as it officially unfolded, as it officially went down and took place. Fantasy fallout as it pertains to the Jets, fantasy fallout as it pertains to the Packers. I will timestamp this live stream for anybody who wants to go back and hear my thoughts again from a fantasy perspective about what this trade means. But again, Aaron Rodgers is officially a New York Jet. The Packers get draft compensation. The Jets, in theory, get an opportunity to compete for the next couple of seasons. Appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out. Again, one more time, I will be live for the NFL draft. That's Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll be hanging out, talking shop all throughout the night. The fantasy fallout of all of the trades, all of the moves, everything that goes down. It's going to be a fun night. It's going to be fun to hang out and talk shop, do all the breakdowns, all that good stuff. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to this entire weekend. I'll look to get some time available for you guys on Friday as well for the second and third rounds because there's plenty of fantasy relevant picks that will be made on Friday night. So we'll make sure that we get that coverage there as well. But that'll do it for me for now. Appreciate you guys coming in, hanging out, and having some dialogue, talking shop. Impromptu stream on Monday in reaction to the Aaron Rodgers news. He is officially a New York Jet. Everybody, have a great week, great start to your week, and I'll hopefully see you guys on Thursday for the NFL draft. Thanks, everybody.